In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to name ionic compounds that contain polyatomic ions. The first one is just simple monatomic ions. This one will involve ions that contain more than one atom. So, polyatomic ions, what are they? Well, they're a group of chemically bonded atoms that have a net charge. The prefix poly means many. Polytheism, it's a religion that believes in many gods. A polygon is a many-sided figure. Polydactylism, many fingers or toes. I went to school with a girl that had 2 thumbs on her right hand. Coincidentally, she was also the class thumb wrestling champion. Just when you thought you had that first thumb down, the second one would jump in. But poly means many. One thing I want you to note as we're going through these lessons, charges are notated as the following. So the first thing, 2+, that is a charge. Charges are listed with the numeral first, then the symbol. All right? If you write it +2, that is an oxidation state. This is not a charge. Okay, +2 is an oxidation state. You'll learn about oxidation states later. The thing that's kind of confusing is that many times charges and oxidation states will be the same, but sometimes they're different. So, if we're writing something with a charge, largely I want you to write it with the numeral first, followed by the plus or minus. Just as when you were naming binary ionic compounds, when polyatomics are present, you still list the cation first, followed by the anion. The major difference is that you don't change the ending of the ions. So you're not dropping anything, changing to "ide." You just simply name it, the polyatomics, as is. So use your chart to find the correct names. All right, we're going to jump right in and we're going to do a few examples, and then I'll have a few examples for you to try out. This first one, NaNO3, all right, the first part, Na, you should recognize that as the cation. That is sodium. The anion, the NO3 is one thing. That is your polyatomic. So one of the issues with kind of learning, how to name compounds and things is you have to be able to identify polyatomic ions, when you see them. So on sight, NO3, if you refer to your chart, is nitrate. So that compound is sodium nitrate. The second one, Ca, calcium. That is an A. The second thing, CO3, is carbonate, calcium carbonate. The last example in this slide, Al2SO4 in parentheses 3. You simply name it just as before. Al is aluminum, and then the polyatomic ion is sulfate. Okay, once again, just like on the previous lesson, you see these little subscripts listed in there, that extra 2 and that 3. Don't be worried about them at this time. All right, they'll come in later. Just be aware that this is the formula for aluminum sulfate. This is the only way that aluminum and sulfate combine in a 2:3 ratio. So aluminum sulfate, Al2SO4 3. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a chance to apply your skills. See if you can name this compound. Go ahead and pause the video here for a moment and see if you can name this compound containing a polyatomic ion. Okay, and we're back. Looking at this, Na is sodium, for sure. Sodium. This second thing, that C2H3O2, that is a polyatomic ion. This one is actually called acetate. All right, and you may notice on your chart there's actually 2 forms of acetate. The way it's written right here, this is probably the most common way you're going to see it written. C2H3O2. There is another way you will notice. It's listed on your chart. It's sometimes acetate is listed as CH3COO. with a minus. This is actually another acceptable form. You'll see it used. The reason why that exists, if you continue your studies on in chemistry and you get into a branch of chemistry known as organic, when you recognize this structure, that tells me something about that compound. This is actually part of a carboxylic acid. This kind of shows me how these atoms are arranged. So what this really means is this. So you have your carbon, you have the 3 hydrogens attached to it, there's another carbon, there's a double bond to an oxygen, and a single bond onto this one. So this, believe it or not, has specific meaning. If you are a organic chemist, I don't want you guys to get all upset about this right now, but if you see this is acetate. This is probably the most common form of acetate. All right, so sodium acetate, or I guess you could also call it nacho. No, don't call it nacho, sodium acetate. Okay, take a moment and see if you can name this compound containing a polyatomic ion. So go ahead and pause the video for just a few moments. Go ahead and see if you can name it, and I'll answer it. Okay, let's look at this one. All right, the cation present is magnesium, and then the polyatomic ion is hydroxide. That's magnesium hydroxide. You don't have to mention the two. The only way magnesium and the hydroxide anion combine is in a 1:2 ratio. And that concludes our second tutorial.